Councillor Richardson, would you just I don't know if it's possible to unmute your microphone.
Right, we'll make a start. Good morning. Welcome to the meeting. For the benefit of those listening in on whatever social media form it is, I don't know. Welcome to North Tyneside Council's Planning Committee. I'm Frank Lott, Councillor and Chair of the Planning Committee. This meeting's being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel to enable members of the press and public to observe the meeting, and welcome to you all, both of you. Before we move on to the agenda, I'd first like to make it clear who's participating in the meeting and explain how we intend to conduct the meeting. To make it clear who's in the meeting, I'd like to ask everyone present to confirm their attendance at the meeting. And to achieve this, I'll call out the names of the members of the committee. After I call your name, please turn on your microphone and camera, introduce yourself so we can be sure that you can be seen and heard. Then I'll move on to the officers. So, Councillor Ken Barry.
I'm Councillor Ken Barry, Cullercoats Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Trish Brady.
Councillor Trish Brady, Councillor for Northumberland Ward and Vice Chair of the committee.
Councillor Linda Dark.
Councillor Linda Dark from Kilnworth Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Sandra Graham from Whitley Bay Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Councillor Muriel Green from Wheatslade Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Hello, Councillor Paul Richardson from Mount Seton North.
Thank you. Councillor Willie Samuel.
Good morning, Councillor Willie Samuel, Cullercoats Ward. Thank you.
And Councillor Wheatman.
Hi, I'm Councillor Wheatman and I represent Tynemouth Ward.
Thank you. Also present are the following officers, and I'll invite them to introduce themselves. Similar fashion, Julie Lawson.
Hello, Julie Lawson, one of the principal officers in the planning department.
Thank you. Dave McCall.
Hi, I'm Dave McCall, Highways Officer.
I think we have Claire Wilson.
Hello, Chair. Yes, Claire Wilson, representing Environmental Health.
Thank you. Stephen Ballantyne.
Hello, Chair. I'm representing Legal and I'm Solicitor.
Thank you. And Michael Robson.
Michael Robson, Clerk to the Committee.
Thanks for that. We've also got other officers joining the meeting to provide technical support and cover in the event of connections being lost. To ensure that the meeting runs smoothly, can I remind participants please to turn off your microphone and camera when not speaking. Only speak when invited to do so by me, and activate your microphone and camera before speaking. If any member or officer wishes to speak, please use the hand raised button or alternatively the chat facility. I do prefer the hand raised button, by the way. If referring to any specific points in a report, please specify the page number. And if any participant's connections to the meeting is lost, we'll adjourn the meeting for a short period of time to allow that connection to be restored. So we'll now begin with the formal agenda, and Michael, apologies for absence, please.
We've received apologies from Councillor Burdis.
Thank you. A substitute?
And I'm not aware of any.
Okay. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do any committee members have any interests they would like to declare in relation to items on the agenda? Right, that's no declarations of interest. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting on the 29th of September as a correct record, please?
Agreed.
Yeah, I'll take silence as assent. And item 5 on page 11, can we note the officers' application reports and the principles to guide members during the meeting? And again, I'll take silence as assent. So that takes us straight onto page 17, land west of 115 and land north of 119 Castle Square.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you should all be able to see the presentation now. Please let me know if that's not the case. I shall commence now. The site is adjacent to Castle Square at Backworth, so the red line denotes the application site on this plan. I shall go on to the next one, which is an aerial. So that red line area covered this area here. It's adjacent to Castle Square at Backworth, and as you can see from here, there are residential dwellings to the south and to the east of the site. You've got the B1317 road to the west of the site, and there is some areas of grassed areas with children's play area in this area here to the north. You can see that the site has a metalled roadway. We've referred to it as a U-shape, but it's rather an upside down U-shape. But I'll mention that in my report. This section here is a U-shape in the centre of the site. And you can see from this aerial photograph that the area is currently soft landscaped with some amenity grassland with a few trees dotted around. And the area to the west contains 2 pairs of goalposts. The southern goalposts are within the application site. Now, it'll just take us on to, this is from the northwest, just looking down on the site. So our application site is here, that we're considering today. So it's this area that I'm just outlining here, and you can see the goalposts there that I mentioned, and the children's play area, which is outside the application site. And that's just taken from the B1317, just looking towards the site. Then again, you can see the goalposts there and some existing housing there. The western half of the application site, this is an extract from our local plan. I thought it would be useful, and I'll refer back to it later in my presentation. The western half of the application site, so basically the purple area here is an allocated housing site in our local plan. And the green hatching denotes a wildlife corridor. The green space here is open space within our local plan. So that's what I referred to as the U-shaped roadway. So our application site covers, again, this area here, just as I denoted there. The application is for full planning permission for 32 affordable homes with 22 affordable rented units and 10 shared ownership dwellings. 12 bungalows are proposed to the eastern half of the site. That's this area here, all sited within that loop of the existing U-shaped road here. A central landscaped area would be sited to the rear of those bungalows, which is here. And the western half of the site would contain a further 20 buildings, which consist of 8 two-storey apartments. That's these here. And a further there's 2 rows of 12 two-storey semi-detached properties to the south of those apartments there. And a new access would be created from the B1317 Killingworth Lane, which would utilise the existing roadway. Representations are set out in the agenda. Councillor Brian Burdis's comments are set out, and 205 objections have been received to the proposal. So I'll go through the planning merits, which are obviously set out in the report as well. In terms of the principle, so I've got the local plan extract up here for members. The site is allocated, this area in purple is allocated as the housing development allocation in the local plan. So it's allocated, the application site is allocated for housing with the exception of this area here, which is allocated as open space. This site is identified in the council's 5-year housing land supply. The housing allocation, which you can see, also includes the area to the north and east of the application site. So this area to the north and east is outside the application site. And whilst the proposal includes a small area outside of the allocated housing site on open space, the actual proposed development and the location of the development allows for the retention of the children's play area, which is here, and housing development is not proposed, obviously, on the whole of the allocated housing site. And the location of the 12 bungalows on the allocated open space would allow for the retention of a larger area of grassed area amenity space, which is currently allocated for housing development. Take us on to the site plan. The land directly to the north of the site is not proposed for housing, as I've just said, under this application, and the landscape architect and biodiversity officer have no objection to the loss of open space on the basis that the remaining land is retained for open space, and given that there is actually some open space proposed within the site as well. Take us back onto the aerial so you can have a look. So the housing development is in this area here. And the proposal does not include the removal or alteration to the existing children's equipped play area to the north of the application site. Sport England initially objected to the development due to the loss of a sports pitch. This relates to the western part of the site, this area here, where there are goalposts present. Whilst the council did not consider these areas with goalposts to constitute a formal playing pitch, Sport England advised they consider any form of goalpost a demarcation and therefore a sports pitch. In light of this, the applicant has agreed to the replacement of the existing goalposts with a demarcated football pitch and a multi-use games area, or a financial contribution for suitable mitigation and at an appropriate location in lieu of this. And they have submitted a plan just showing this. So you've got a playing pitch and a multi-use games area. That would be in the area to the north of the application site. So at the top end there, up here. The installation of a playing pitch in the multi-use games area or financial contribution can be controlled by means of a Section 106 agreement. And in the event that the multi-use games area could not be located on the land to the north of the housing site, there would be a financial contribution provided for alternative mitigation. So in officer opinion, the elements of the proposal outside of the proposed allocated housing site is acceptable and the principle of the development is considered to be acceptable. Turning to residential amenity, the dwellings will be laid out in the street formation, as you can see on the plan there, and the proposed bungalows are arranged in that U shape there. They all face out onto the existing road with their rear boundaries backing onto that grassed amenity space there. The development would not result in any detrimental overlooking or overshadowing of any proposed or existing dwellings. Each dwelling has off-street parking, dedicated refuse storage and a private rear amenity space, and they meet the nationally described space standards. And the Manager of Environmental Health has requested conditions relating to a noise scheme and any required mitigation for the dwellings to the west of the site, given the proximity to Killingworth Lane B1317. Subject to conditions, it's considered that an acceptable level of amenity can be achieved for occupiers of the proposed dwellings, and in terms of securing the amenity of the existing occupiers as well. The applicant has submitted some street scenes. I've got 2 slides for this, just in terms of the impact on the character and appearance of the area. So the top one's facing out onto the west, onto the B1317. And then you've got those show the apartments and the bungalows facing north. And the proposed layout respects the existing layout of housing in the area with an outward facing development, and the bungalows to the east and the 2-storey properties to the west. The design officer has no objections, and the siting and layout of the proposal would integrate well with the existing street layout with well-designed dwellings, and the proposal would not result in visual intrusion or the unacceptable loss of visual amenity. In terms of impact on trees and biodiversity, a landscaping scheme has been submitted. The application site, as I mentioned earlier, is within a wildlife corridor. The proposal would result in the loss of 20 trees. However, the applicant is proposing to plant 40 trees throughout the development to provide mitigation, in addition to planting within the proposed landscaping scheme. The landscape architect and the biodiversity officer have advised that the replacement planting and the landscaping plan would provide sufficient mitigation, and conditions are proposed relating to biodiversity and landscaping. Take us back onto our site plan. In terms of parking and highway safety, I mentioned that the new access is proposed from the B1317. In terms of parking, the spaces are provided within the site to meet current standards, and the Highways Network Manager supports the proposal subject to a suitable Section 278 agreement and the imposition of certain conditions. And also, as set out in the agenda, Highways England have no objections to the proposal. In terms of other issues, the site is in flood zone 1, which is the lowest risk. The local lead flood authority in Northumberland Water have no objections. In terms of contaminated land officer and the coal authority as well have no objections to the proposal. The applicant proposes that all of the proposed units will be affordable, with a mix of affordable rent and shared ownership dwellings. And Section 106 contributions have been requested and agreed, and these are set out in the agenda. They relate to ecology, allotments, children's play, primary education, employment and training, and coastal mitigation. In conclusion, a significant part of the housing site is allocated for housing development, and mitigation is proposed for the loss of open space on the site. In addition, the whole housing allocation is not proposed for development. The development will be in keeping with the street scene and the character of the area and will provide additional homes. It is officer advised that the development is acceptable and is recommended for conditional approval subject to a Section 106 agreement and the recommendation as set out in the addendum, which was circulated late last week on Friday. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thanks very much, Julie. Just before we move on, can I just ensure, did did any member not receive the addendum? In fact, there were 3 items in an addendum note that was sent out last week. Right, I'll take that everyone's received them.
Frank, I didn't.
Yes.
Ken Barry, I didn't.
Is that Ken Barry?
Yes, it's Ken Barry. I didn't receive.
Right. In which case, I can advise Ken that the addendum relating to this item was a short one. I'm trying to see where there's a synopsis of it.
Chair, would you like me to summarise it? I've got it up
If
here.
you could, please, yes.
Basically, the addendum, I'll just run through, I'll summarise what it said. The officer had set out just some details on, in terms of the, as I've mentioned, in terms of the land designated for housing and open space, and set out that the officer had measured that it would result in approximately just, well, 5,926 square metres of allocated open space, which was the U-shaped road I mentioned. And the rest of the house, the wider allocation, so the wider allocation, approximately 13,826 square metres of the allocated housing site does not fall within this application, the actual development, and so that would be retained as open space as secured by a Section 106 agreement. The design officer comments with no objections. That was also set out, and was advised in Sport England, the replacement playing pitch and multi-use games area have been negotiated with Sport England, whilst there's a holding objection until the Section 106 agreement has been signed. Otherwise, they have no objection to the proposal and they can be consulted on the terms of the Section 106. And just some more details on the contaminated land officer who's reviewing some further information that's been submitted. And if the details are acceptable, we could amend certain conditions or remove them. But at the moment, we have recommended contaminated land conditions. So it was just setting out that recommendation again, and also an amended condition for the proposed approved plans, just clarifying some of the reference numbers. So that's what was set out in the agenda, in the addendum.
Okay, Julie, thanks for that. Now moving on, in accordance with the committee's temporary speaking rights scheme, a number of residents of Backwith were granted permission to submit a written statement to the committee in relation to this application. And on behalf of the residents, Mr. George Scott of Castle Square has submitted a statement which Michael will now read to the committee.
Okay, thanks, Chair. This development will drastically reduce the available community and amenity space and result in the loss of much used playing field space. This local amenity is used by the residents of Backwith on a daily basis for recreational and social activities and is an important focal point of the community. This free access open space is a safe place for children to play, ride bikes and fly kites. It's an area for dog walkers, a place to exercise, such as particularly football, yoga and boot camp, and a place for community-led activities such as fun days and Easter egg hunts. It contributes to the well-being of everyone in the local area, as confirmed by the representation from the Campaign to Protect Rural England, urging you to protect the community asset of this open space. Here we outline how the latest proposal and planning officer's recommendation fails to comply with the local plan, the National Planning Policy Framework and the Sport England Planning Framework. Failure to comply with local plan policy DM 5.2. No exceptions to policy DM 5.2 are met or evidenced by planning in paragraphs 9.2 and 9.14 of the report. A. It has not been demonstrated the site no longer has any value to the community in terms of access or function. Consider the opening statement, the petition from 400 plus local residents and over 200 planning objections submitted. The packed second consultation at Backwith Community Hall on 28th August 2018 resulted in a petition with 280 and more objections. B. The site does not include a designated wildlife site. A central tree group would be removed and open space would be lost in the wildlife corridor. C. This site is meeting the shortfall of provision in green space. It is the only open space in the area and is being reduced in size. Non-delivery of key elements in Backworth Park Section 106s also means this green space is meeting additional shortfall. D. The proposed development is not ancillary to green infrastructure as it damages the wildlife corridor, fells mature trees and removes a significant percentage of green space. Failure to comply with local plan policy DM 5.9. Compliance with policy DM 5.9 is not evidenced by planning in paragraphs 13.11 and 13.12, as they are relying on new tree planting to offset loss of mature trees. The landscape architect and biodiversity officer have stated new and younger trees will not provide the same visual impact that currently is provided by this tree group and therefore does not meet policy A. To further illustrate this failure to comply with DM 5.9, the planning officer's own recommendation concedes the landscape architect and biodiversity officer have stated amendments need to be made. Failure to comply with local plan policy S7.10. Policy S7.10 and paragraph 97 of the National Planning Policy Framework both state the requirement for open space to be maintained or enhanced in terms of quantity and quality. The quantity of open space is being reduced as confirmed by planning in paragraphs 8.16 and 9.11. Therefore, the proposal does not comply. We contest the officer's advice in paragraph 9.10 regarding a small loss of green space. The development covers approximately 50% of green space, the pitch and multi-use games area approximately 50% of the rest, leaving approximately 25% of green space. We request confirmed figures and anticipated loss. We contest officer advice in paragraph 8.11. The construction of some 880 dwellings at Backworth Park has more than doubled the size of Backworth. The 2011 census gives a population of 1,399. As recreational provision from Section 106s for Backworth Park are largely undelivered, its residents use the Castle Park space as their only free access open space. The proposed reduction quantity of open space affects all of Backworth. Failure to comply with playing field policy exception 4. Contrary to planning advice in paragraph 9.10, Dave Maguire, planning manager at Sport England, has confirmed in an email to our committee dated 19th October 2020 that what is being put forward by way of replacement provision in the draft Section 106 agreement does not properly fit field policy exception 4 in a number of respects. Beyond failing to meet policy, the loss of outdoor playing fields for up to 24 months during the COVID-19 pandemic is highly unsatisfactory. We contest the following further areas that would be detrimental to the whole of Backworth. The site can only adequately accommodate the amount of housing proposed and referenced in officer's advice in paragraph 8.8 by drastically reducing the free access open space to the detriment of the existing population. This significantly undermines compliance with local plan policy S4.3 in the view of residents of Backworth. The large reduction in green space, felling of mature trees, provision of a smaller, age-restricted football pitch, and a hard surface multi-use games area does not constitute equivalent or better provision. We ask that you reject this planning application due to non-compliance with numerous local and national planning policies. Please save our open shared green space.
Thank you, Michael. You can take a glass of water now because you're going to be invited to read out the next statement because Councillor Brian Burtis, one of the local ward councillors, has submitted a written statement setting out his objection to the application. So would you like to read that now, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address the Planning Committee and place my objection to the proposed development at Castle Park. My objection is supported by the majority of people living on Castle Park and the residents of Backworth and across North Tyneside. The area in question is an amenity grassed field, a play area much used by local residents, especially the children. It is safe and open. It is used for football and other ball games alongside the general play of children. Parents feel their children are safe using the field, as they can be seen while they play. It is also used by families and the local resident community group for picnics, community fun days and fundraising events. Dog walkers also use the playing field to exercise their dogs. The field is also the only remaining grass-free play area in Valley Ward. You only need to check on Google Earth to see available open greenfield sites in the ward that children can play. It is the only one. A development on the site will take this away. The reduced play area proposed in the report is next to a busy road. This will put children in danger. That alone should give the planning committee some cause for concern. Children pushed to the roadside. The site also falls within a wildlife corridor. The proposed mitigation will not, if in any way or form, mitigate for the loss of mature habitat and the species that live in and on the trees and other flora on the site. The removal of the trees will see a reduction in biodiversity, a loss of invertebrates, which include birds, small mammals and other animals that help create a healthy ecosystem. The loss of biodiversity is at crisis point on this planet. We need to think global and act local. We cannot expect others to do what we will not. The planning committee has a responsibility to act for biodiversity and not contribute to its loss. The well-being and quality of life of residents is also in question by the proposed development. It is inevitable that the proposed housing will bring greater car use. Public transport through the village, especially on Castle Park, is insufficient, with few buses serving the area. The development will increase the traffic in addition to the new housing that now virtually surrounds Backworth. Residents will see increased noise, increased air pollution, and the more traffic on narrow roads that are already plagued by speeding drivers. Not a good outlook for the health and well-being of the residents of Castle Park if the development is accepted. The planning committee should also note the amount of new build within the area. Valley Ward, in all probability, has seen the largest amount of development in recent years than any other ward in the borough. A ward that less than 20 years ago was made up of 3 discrete villages, West Allotment, Shiremoor and Backworth. That has now been lost. Once where there were fields and trees between the villages, now there is only concrete, tarmac and new houses. You can now walk from West Allotment to Backworth without seeing any agricultural land, a semi-rural heritage lost to North Tyneside forever. The proposed development will make this loss even greater. It will encompass a community already feeling hemmed in by development. The area designated for development is not only seen as an asset by the local community, it is seen as an asset by the Campaign to Protect Rural England. They see the value of the field. A community asset that once given over to development will be lost forever. A significant loss to the heritage of Backworth Village and North Tyneside. As mentioned earlier, the playing field is the last open access playing field in Valley Ward, and as members of the planning committee may agree, most developers would prefer not to have play sites and community areas on their developments. They would rather put a few houses on the space and provide some funding for play and community activities elsewhere. The new housing in Valley Ward does not provide grassed play areas or community facilities for its residents, which is why it is all the more important that the play area is not given over to development. The playing field is within short walking distance of residents of the new estates who are without safe play areas for their children and a place to exercise in the open. So, taking the playing field away for development will not only be detrimental to the residents of Castle Park, but also to the surrounding new housing. I will close now by emphasising that I believe, as do the residents of Castle Park, Backworth and many others, that the planning committee should reject this development on the grounds of all the detrimental effects that building on the playing field will have to the residents, the community and the environment. We would not build on other well-used playing sites across the borough. We should not be building on this much valued amenity.
Thank you, Michael. As is customary in planning committee procedure in normal times, the applicants have been given sight of the 2 objections and have been given the opportunity to reply. So Cundall Planning Consultants, on behalf of the applicants Benicia Group, have set out a response to the residents and Councillor Burdis's comments. Michael, could you please read that out to us now?
Certainly. On behalf of our client, we would like to thank the committee for their time in considering the application for this affordable housing scheme. For nearly 50 years, Bernicia Group have been delivering quality affordable homes and has provided a range of property types and tenures to meet local housing need. This scheme will provide 100% affordable housing as well as biodiversity net gain and the opportunity to provide sports provision in the area. The site is in a well-established residential area on previously developed land and offers an opportunity not only to provide housing for those in need now, but to provide a sustainable place to live for years to come. The scheme will contribute to North Tyneside's affordable housing supply, and it was evidence that there is need for this type of accommodation in the area, as a number of enquiries for the properties were made by local people following the public consultation. The existing children's play facility will not be moved as a result of the development. The majority of the homes proposed are located on an allocated housing site. The reconfiguration of land use on the site allows the built-up area to be consolidated. A considerably larger proportion of the land will be retained as open space than if the whole allocated housing site, which covers the existing children's play area and sports pitches, were to be built out. This also means that the green space to the north and west of the scheme will remain accessible from the surrounding area. We understand that there was extensive consultation undertaken prior to the adoption of the local plan. There is a clear requirement for the council to maintain at least a 5-year supply of housing land to allocate development sites to deliver this and for those to be clearly justified. Having allocated the sites, there is an expectation that development comes forward on them. The principle of housing development on the site has been deemed acceptable through this process. An ecology assessment has shown that the site is currently of limited ecological value. The wildlife corridor has been given significant consideration throughout the development of the scheme, and numerous discussions have taken place with the council's landscape architect and biodiversity officer since the comments cited by Mr. Scott were made. Their input has been reflected in the final landscape strategy that will provide biodiversity net gain on the site. As a result of the development, there will be double the current number of trees on the site, and the planting has been selected to encourage biodiversity. Furthermore, bat and bird boxes will provide additional support for the wildlife corridor, and all ecology measures will be secured by planning condition. The landscape architect and biodiversity officer have no objection to the scheme and are now supportive of the proposals. The sports provision at the site will be formalised, with the existing goalposts being replaced with a new sports pitch and multi-use games area subject to planning. In line with Sport England Playing Field Policy Exception 4 and Local Planning Policy S710, this provides an improvement in terms of quality, as the multi-use games area can withstand more frequent use than a grassed pitch. The new playing pitch will be no closer to the road than the existing pitches, and safety will be increased further on the games area, as the fence will prevent balls leaving the site. The email correspondence cited by Mr. Scott states that Sport England found the proposed re-provision to be the best achievable outcome in the circumstances of the case. Dave Maguire from Sport England has agreed that the proposed plan and the wording of the draft Section 106 agreement is acceptable and confirmed he has no objection to the scheme. Transport impacts from the 32 homes have been assessed and are minimal in the context of the village. The transport statement, parking and cycle storage provision have all been accepted by the Highways Officer, who has stated that the impact from the development is not considered to be severe and the site has reasonable links with public transport. The design and layout of the scheme have been selected to respect the context of the development. The dwellings are in keeping with the street scene and have integrated landscaping, which enhances the character of the area. Furthermore, it has been shown that the proposed development complies with relevant national and local plan policy, for example in relation to flood risk, drainage and the highway network. The planning application must be decided on its own merits, and it is clear that the partially allocated housing site provides an ideal opportunity to fulfil the objectives of the adopted local plan and the National Planning Policy Framework by contributing to a sustainable, affordable housing supply. The planning balance falls significantly in favour of the proposed development as a result of the benefit to the community of North Tyneside through the provision of high quality affordable housing of an appropriate size and tenure to meet local need.
Thank you, Michael. That concludes the statements that have been presented. Michael's had a bit of a marathon there, so you can relax. Can I invite members of the committee to ask any questions of officers, please? No. And Councillor Brady.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just clarify, Julie, that mature stand of trees in the middle of the upside down U, is that all going to be removed?
Hello, yes, I'll just go on to the relevant slides to show this. Yeah, that's a better view of them actually that in this 3D aerial. So those are, yeah, if I just take us to where they are on there and then take us to the site plan, yeah, those would be in that area there. So yes, they would be removed. As we've set out the comments of the landscape architect in terms of tree loss, and the comments are on page, sorry, just find the page number for members now. Page 49 to 50, there's joint landscaping and biodiversity comments. So they've acknowledged the tree loss, but it's in terms of the replacement planting, the comments from the biodiversity officer and landscape architect set out that yes, 20 trees are to be removed, and the landscape plan, they've said, proposes a great number of trees to be planted, and in terms of mitigation for the loss and to achieve a similar value with new planting, the applicant will be required to plant a number of trees at a larger size so that tree cover can be maintained and visual impact is achieved at the outset. And so they're satisfied that subject to conditions controlling new planting, there is plenty of opportunity within this site. And I think we can see where those could go within the site to achieve replacement planting. And the applicant had proposed, I think there was a loss of 20 trees, and they were proposing replacement of, I think it says 40 trees, but we can control that by means of condition.
Can I also ask in relation to the multi-use games area, is that something that came through community consultation, or was that the idea of the developer?
I'm not aware whether it's come through community consultation. Certainly just as way of background in terms of just the background to the Sport England issue. This is where there's goalposts right up this site, and the housing, as I've said many times, is on this area, so it would affect one set of goalposts. So obviously that's been identified as a housing site in the local plan, and Sport England were consulted on the local plan. The council's senior manager of sport and leisure has advised that these areas aren't included in our portfolio of formal playing fields that are hired out and not used to our knowledge for formal or organised football matches. But nevertheless, Sport England believed them to fall under the remit of a pitch. So that's where the discussions during the process of the determination of the application came about, where the alternative mitigation would be provided, and hence this is where the multi-use games area and playing field have now come about as part of this proposal. And Sport England considered that it would meet exception 4, which is that the area of playing field to be lost as a result of the development will be replaced by a newer area of playing field, which is of equivalent or better quality, of equivalent or greater quantity, and in a suitable location. And so, subject to that, Sport England considered that it would meet that exception. So this is where this has come about during the course of the application, to try and get something that's well, to be honest, it's probably a better provision than what's there now.
Okay, Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Julie, would you mind putting the slide up with the mugger? If I heard you correctly, I think you said in your presentation that if the developer was not able to place these 2 areas in this location, something else would happen. Is that what you said?
Yes. The multi-use games area would need planning consent, and the Section 106 would have to be worded to reflect that. So an alternative would be to get a financial contribution and have alternative provision provided, and that will be set out in the Section 106 to ensure that suitable mitigation will be provided. But what's shown here is a way of achieving a playing pitch and a multi-use games area on the site to the north of the proposed housing development.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. Just a general question. I'm very conscious of the fact that there's an awful lot of housing being built in that area, which was referred to by Councillor Burdis. And we have many times commented when we've looked at huge planning developments that they tend to stick the affordable housing the furthest away from the amenities and the site entrance and things. This almost looks to me as if it's a bit of an add-on. I'm not sure whether it's accumulated affordable housing which is applied to the rest of the 880 houses, but I wanted to ask about where the nearest amenities were, like shops and any sort of facilities, because they do tend to get, if they're stuck out on the end, as I say, they are the furthest away, and these are perhaps going to be occupied by perhaps the most vulnerable or needy people, certainly older people in them. And where are the local amenities attached to those particular planning application, please?
Yes, thank you. The officer in the report on page 21, paragraph 8.9 is set out that obviously the site is within a well-established residential area, which you can obviously see here. So it's obviously part of Backworth itself. They've mentioned the bus stops, which I think you can just see the little bus stop signs at the top there and at the west on that image there. So it is in close proximity to bus stops. There is a village shop, I think a takeaway as well, at the eastern end of Backworth. So that's the officers measured that 650 metres from village amenities, which is, they've said, the shop, takeaway and community hall, and obviously 900 metres from the nearest primary school. And they've set out the distance to the district centre as well. But in terms of, there is a shop in Backworth, and that's at the eastern end of Backworth. Just to the east of, there's a roundabout at the eastern end of Backworth where, and that's where the shop's near there. So there are amenities within Backworth itself.
Thank you. Yes. The other question is the public transport goes up. I use that road almost every time I go up to my ward because you go around. It's a very, very congested road. The addition of additional traffic on there, has that been totally considered as well? Is there a comment from Dave McCall that I've seen some of it, but could you just comment generally, please?
Yeah, Councillor, as part of the application, transport assessment was submitted, and to be honest, because it's only 32 dwellings, it doesn't really have much of an impact on the surrounding highway network. You're talking, 16 trips in the AM peak and 19 trips maybe in the PM peak. So that would be absorbed by the network as it stands. So there's no need for any improvements.
It just seems to me that this almost looks like an add-on. The other point about the accumulation of the affordable housing, we've got a lot of developments that have offered affordable housing. Is this an accumulation of them, or is this an accumulation that is associated with the 880? And are there any other affordable housing little plots within the 880 that have developed. I was absolutely amazed at the growth there. Are there any other affordable, or is this the only one that is attributed to that particular huge development, please?
This application, just to start off, I've got the local plan extract up here again. I mean, the majority of the site, with the exception of that little bit of open space there, is actually part of a wider housing allocation within this site. So it has been considered through the local plan process. So the site itself was identified as being suitable for housing, a housing allocation within this site. This proposal is for all affordable housing. There will be other schemes within the area which have a percentage of affordable housing. I haven't got exact figures off the top of my head, but certainly we do ask, as you're aware, for a percentage of affordable housing from new housing developments, and so that will generally be part of housing schemes in the area. But this scheme itself is for, as the applicant wants it, for all affordable housing, which the local planning authority sees a positive thing for the area. But as I say, the wider site was considered appropriate for housing in terms of the local plan allocation as well.
Thank you.
Okay, no other members indicated they wish to ask a question, so can we move to comments from members, please? Is anybody? Councillor Brady.
I welcome this in terms of the supply of affordable homes. I do have some concerns in relation to the football pitch and the multi-use area, because I think what we're hearing is from the community is that the existing land is used for a much wider use of community uses than playing games, so community events, exercise classes, dog walking and that sort of thing. So although I'm inclined to support it, I am concerned about how the remainder of the green space is managed there, and I would prefer that we ask the developer to go back and really get something that's more acceptable by the community.
Okay, Councillor Richardson.
Hello, thanks, Chair. In common with the thoughts that Councillor Brady just expressed, I'm broadly in agreement, I think. I read this last night, and my overwhelming sense, and I'd welcome any comments back. My overwhelming sense of this proposal was that it hasn't been straightforward. The affordable housing is obviously extremely welcome, and the reconfigured sports games open area just about works. I'm a little bit concerned about the idea that if for some reason it doesn't, there will be funds available to offer something similar, and I don't know how that plays in terms of what space might or might not be available for that. It's all very well to have the money to do it, but if there's nowhere to put those facilities, that doesn't really count for much. But my overwhelming sense is that here's a proposal that's been worked through with the developers and with the officers, and between them they've come up with something that works. And I understand local concerns and on some level a loss of the open space. To my mind, the additional, and I think it's additional sports facilities balance that. So I think, on balance, having read it and having heard this morning, I'd say this is not a straightforward proposal, but it's been worked through well and has come to a point where it works. So I think I just on balance, I'd be in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Green. Councillor Green, if you're speaking, can I just advise you that you must still be on mute?
Right, thank you. Yes, sorry. We desperately need affordable housing, and every time we get an application like this, we have to consider a lot of different things. I somehow feel, maybe it's just an instinctive reaction, but that we're being pushed into this in an area where we may not give planning permission to ordinary houses that a developer is coming along just because they are affordable housing. And that really does sadden me. I'm desperately against the loss of open space, but if it had, and as I say, if it had been ordinary housing, I would just have said, you know, that the loss of open space is not acceptable. I think I'm going to say this time, in this particular case, that because there is a huge number of objections and people have taken the trouble to have meetings and write to various people and get a lot of support, that I'm going to say no to this application on the grounds of the loss of open space. I do it very sadly because we desperately need affordable housing, but I'm not prepared to let chunks of open space. This open space is not just for the people of Backworth, it's all the people who are in the new houses who, has already been said, don't have a lot of open space left. And I do take Councillor Burtis's point about pushing children further and further nearer to the road, and that's not acceptable. I'm concerned also about the highway issues. It's a 20-mile-an-hour road going through Backworth, and it is overstretched. It's a rat run all the way around that particular area, and I'm not convinced that we're doing the right thing by supporting this application. So I'm going to vote against it on the grounds of the loss of open space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. For my own part, I think that Councillor Burtis and George Scott, on behalf of the residents, have presented some compelling and comprehensive arguments against the scheme. However, I have to say that I think the planning officers and the developers have worked through many of those objections and have come up with what I would describe as adequate compensation in terms of new facilities for the communities adjacent to this site. And I think that, strictly speaking, in planning terms, we ought to be approving this application. And that's what this committee is about. We have to consider items and applications on their planning merit. So no one else has indicated they wish to speak. So Michael, can I ask you please to conduct the vote? The officer recommendation set out on page 17 of the agenda. And can you now go through the committee members to ask if they are in favour or if they're against, please?
Yeah. And just to say the recommendations, that was slightly amended by the addendum, just in terms of the conditions.
Thanks for reminding me about that. Yeah, that's as per Julie's comments earlier.
So these are votes for or against that recommendation. Councillor Barry?
For.
Councillor Brady?
For.
Councillor Dark?
For.
Councillor Graham?
For.
Councillor Green?
Against.
Councillor Lott?
For.
Councillor Richardson?
For.
Councillor Samuel, who I think may have left the meeting. Yes. Councillor Samuel's absent at this moment. Councillor Wheatman?
Against.
So, Chair, that's carried 6 votes to 2.
Right, thanks for that, Michael. That development's approved. Can we move now to item 7 on page 61, 1 Trivet Terrace?
Yes, can I just check you can still see the presentation, please?
Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. The application relates to a raised grassed area at the junction of Trivet Terrace and Preston Road, North Shields. The red line denotes the application site. It's located to the north of the Scott and Wilson, which is a restaurant which occupies number 1, which is the area outlined in blue. take us on to there. So that this aerial shows the application site here, which is the raised grassed area here. The surrounding area contains a mixture of residential and commercial properties. To the north is a public house. To the immediate east and south is a small shopping parade, and there are residential flats above the application site and the 2 adjoining units. The application is for retrospective planning permission to change the use of this raised grassed area to an outdoor dining area for the use of Scott and Wilson, and it's proposed to enclose the area with timber fencing and install a ramp at the western end of land to provide access. And I'll take us through, because obviously it's retrospective, it's already been done, so I can show you what it looks like in pictures. So that's the area and hashed area there. And that's just a plan showing the fencing, but I can actually show you what it looks like. So this is the area here. It was a raised grassed area, and they've enclosed it just for use. Got a couple of different elevations there. So this shows the ramp up to it and the fenced area and the tables on there. And a couple of different angles there, and just another angle there as well. Councillor Kath Davis has submitted a representation which is set out in the agenda, and we've had 5 objections and 356 support comments have been received, and those are all summarised in the agenda. The principle of the proposal is considered to be acceptable, given that it would support an existing business and help secure economic growth. The site is located in an area which contains both residential and commercial properties. The proposed outside seating has the potential to impact on residential occupiers as a result of increased noise associated with customer use. And environmental health comments are set out, and the manager of environmental health notes that there are residential flats above the site and the adjoining properties, and raises concerns regarding the potential impact from noise from customers during the late evening period. Conditions are recommended to control the hours during which the outside seating can be used, prevent external speakers and music, and requiring that a noise management scheme is submitted for approval. It's officer advice that the impact is acceptable, subject to the imposition of the recommended conditions by environmental health, and that the seating only be used between the hours of 8 AM and 9 PM. The grassed area has been enclosed by a painted timber fence, which you can see obviously in the photograph there. And tables and umbrellas have been placed on the land, and the access ramp has been installed as well. In officer opinion, the proposal does not result in any harm to the street scene and does not appear out of character. In order to protect the grass from foot traffic, particularly during the winter months, a condition is recommended requiring that details of an alternative means of surface treatment are submitted for approval. In officer opinion, the impact on the character and appearance of the area is acceptable. In terms of highways merits, the highways network manager has no objections. He states that the additional seating area is unlikely to have a severe impact in terms of additional traffic. He does not consider that the proposed fencing would have a detrimental impact on visibility at the junction. That I think you can see from these various photographs there. And he notes that the footpath between the site and the forecourt has not been reduced in width, and the impact on the highway network is therefore considered to be acceptable. And the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Julie. Now, just for correct minuting, we did have a request by Georgia Graham of Setonville Crescent and Peter Atkinson at Trivet Terrace were granted permission to submit a written statement to the committee, but none has been received. However, Councillor Kath Davis, the local ward councillor, has submitted a written statement setting out her comments on the application, and I'd like to ask Michael to read it, please.
Okay. For this representation, I have spoken at length to some residents in the near vicinity of Scott and Wilson, the applicants, who have raised concerns with me about this planning application. From the outset, these residents have made it clear to me that they do not want to impede the business, but want to secure a situation whereby both the bistro is successful and the residential quiet aspects of the area are maintained. They have commented that since the licensing committee took the decision to reduce licensing hours for the outside area, there has been a notable reduction in noise levels. I have forwarded a report to members of the planning committee from these residents outlining their concerns. I have explained to the residents that the planning application will deal solely with the outside grassed area, and other concerns such as parking and the footpath would have to be dealt with separately, but I will refer to these aspects. I have also conducted my own survey around the area to ascertain residents' and businesses' opinion about the use of the grassed area. 250 questionnaires were delivered around the area and I have received 22 replies. I have prepared a report that is included in the papers for this meeting. Most of the replies were favourable about the use of the outside area at Scott and Wilson. They welcomed the bistro as a well-used asset to the local community and economy. However, there were concerns around the parking, and I am aware that residents are applying for limited parking around the area, as since the bistro has been operating, there has been a noticeable increase in parked cars around the area. As regard the area itself, residents did suggest that the area be converted from a grassed area to a modern resin surface. This would prevent slippage and be more attractive. The ramp leading to the grassed area does not appear to conform with health and safety standards and needs attention. The pavement adjoining the area is in need of attention and is unsafe, therefore this should be referred to officers. It may be that the proprietors of Scott and Wilson could agree with the council to look at a joint resurfacing of the area between the grassed area and the bistro to make it more attractive and safe. A couple of the residents did feel that the area should be converted back to a grassed area and not be used as an outside area to the bistro. In conclusion, the area would benefit from the grassed area being a resin surface and a ramp that meets safety standards. The adjoining paved area needs to be made safe and more attractive and suitable for pedestrians, especially those disabled pavement users. It may be Section 106 monies could be used to fund these improvements on the footpath. I would also advise that members of the Planning Committee visit the site to inspect the area and see the concerns highlighted, but I am mindful this may not be possible during COVID restrictions.
Does that conclude the statement?
It does, yes.
Right, fine, thanks. Now, can I ask Michael, have the applicants responded?
They have, yes.
Could you read out their statement, please?
Well, certainly. So this is from Calvin Cass on behalf of Scott and Wilson Limited. At Scott and Wilson, we provide employment on a full-time basis for 10 staff and 4 on a part-time basis. All of these people are locals and we are fully integrated in the community, buying as much as our produce and supplies from local butchers, bakers, fruitiers and other suppliers. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we have fully followed the government's advice on social distancing and the encouraged use of outdoor spaces to provide a safe work environment and a safe environment to socialise in. We requested the usage of the grassed area from the relevant departments of the local authority and duly received the go-ahead from Streetworks, Maintenance and Highway departments in February 2020 and felt we were compliant with their requests. It was not until some 4 months later we were made aware of the requirement to change the use of the land to A3, and since then we have duly complied with this request and also since then duly complied with the ever-changing COVID-19 guidelines and our premises licence. Whilst these two areas are separate to planning, our continued adherence to these areas shows good faith on our part to use the area in line with any restrictions placed upon us by responsible authorities. Our business is thriving during the most challenging times ever seen in my lifetime, both from a national health perspective and also in the hospitality sector. We provide stable, reliable and much needed jobs in this sector, and if we were unable to continue to use the area in line with our licensable hours, the continuity of the business would be threatened and redundancies, if not total bankruptcy, would follow. We do not wish for this to happen at all. We have the overwhelming support of our local residents and community and feel that our application should be granted as applied for and feel it wholly unfair for a minimal handful of objectors to stand in the way of a thriving business that, whilst is in existence to make money for ourselves, it also provides for 14 immediate families and the families of all of our local supply chain. We also wish for the permission to be granted on a permanent basis. We have beautified the area and from what was a drab, abandoned patch of grass used as a dog toilet with a broken phone box to a family-friendly community hub for food and drinks and see no reason why this should not continue. There has been no police incidents, no noise or pollution incidents since opening the outdoor area, which will have hopefully put the fears of the tiny percentage of the public that have objected to rest.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I think it's time for questions now from members. Yes, Councillor Barry.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Just concerned the distance between where those seats are, where the tables are located, and that wall. Is it sufficient to permit people to pass under COVID regulations, which means they've got to be, I think, 1.5 apart?
In actual fact, Councillor Barry, that is the pavement as it always has been, because the forecourt is part of Scott and Wilson's land on that patch on the left of the picture, and on the right hand side that's the grassed area. So that is the pavement as it was originally. They haven't infringed on it.
Thank you.
Nobody else has indicated that they wish to ask questions. Can I now invite comments? Councillor Barry.
Yes, I welcome this action. I will be supporting it. Having lived in the area and for years walking past it, and it used to be a weed infested, litter strewn dog toilet place. I walk in it. It looks good, and it's a vast improvement.
Right, thank you. No one else has indicated they wish to speak. Personally, I'll endorse Councillor Barry's comments. Initially, I thought that the land was in council ownership, so therefore Councillor Barry's description of it as it used to be would have been an embarrassment, but it's not council owned. And I think, having called up there last Friday evening and observed that the social distancing measures were being applied inside the micro pub, I'm quite satisfied that these people are running a sound business. Councillor Graham, you've indicated.
Yes, Chair. Could I just ask, in light of what the resident was saying, that highways officers take a look at that ramp and the access ways, because it did look a little bit suspect, just to make sure that it's safe for people.
Thank you. You certainly can ask that, although we can't consider it as the planning application itself. But your comments have been noted. No one else has indicated, so the officer recommendation is on page 66. We can move to the vote. In summary, it is that the application be permitted subject to the conditions set out on pages 66 and 67 of the agenda papers. So, Michael, can you do the roll call, please?
Yeah. Councillor Barry.
4.
Councillor Brady.
4.
Councillor Dark.
4.
Councillor Graham.
4.
Councillor Green.
4.
Councillor Lott.
4.
Councillor Richardson.
4.
Councillor Samuel still isn't in the meeting, and Councillor Wheatman.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Can we move on now to page 77, site of the former Drift Inn, Seton Burn. This is yours, Julie. Oh, yes, again, Julie, sorry. Can I ask you to refer to the addendum in your presentation for Councillor Barry's benefit?
Certainly, I shall make a note of that to mention that at the end of my presentation, but if I forget, do remind me. I'll try not to.
Please start. Can I check? Councillor Graham, is your hand up from the last time, or do you wish to add something? Councillor Graham, your hand's still up. Can you proceed, Julie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The application relates to a rectangular parcel of land outlined in red here, formerly occupied by a public house, the Drift Inn. The Drift Inn has since been demolished and the site has been vacant for several years. This just shows an aerial view of the vacant site. Immediately to the northeast of the site, there's a residential dwelling here, which is called Meadow Cottage, and I'll be referring to that quite a few times during my presentation. To the northwest, there's a commercial property, and access to the Seton Burn recreation ground and Meadow Cottage is to the southeast along here, and beyond which is a car sales property enterprise use. Residential properties, the Willows, are located to the southwest beyond the adjacent highway, and the site itself is designated as a housing site. That just shows a 3D image from above of Meadow Cottage and the site itself. Planning permission is sought for the construction of 10 dwellings, 5 3-bed and 5 4-bed. 2 house types are proposed, and I'll just show you those. So there's one of the house types. I'll come back onto them in a minute. And there's the other house type. The main issue for members to consider relate to the principle, the impact on the character and appearance of the site and surrounding area, the impact on the amenity of existing and future residents, highway safety and biodiversity. In terms of the representations, Councillor Anthony McMullen submitted a representation, and that's set out in the agenda, and there have been 4 objections from 3 addresses. In terms of the principle, the site is a designated housing site and it will contribute to meeting the housing needs of the borough. It's officer advice that the principle of some form of residential development on this site is acceptable, and the potential housing land supply from this proposal is included in the 5-year supply of housing land. In terms of impact on the character and appearance of the site and the surrounding area, we've mentioned that the site is located it's a mixed-use area of Seton Burn, and to the northeast there is a bungalow, Meadow Cottage, beyond which lies the Seton Burn recreation ground. In terms of the house types, there's 2 house types, both are 2.5 stories with a dormer to the front, and they have bedroom in their roof space. The design approach in terms of the dwellings themselves has been supported by the design officer. However, in terms of the site layout, there are concerns regarding the number of units proposed and the layout of the site. The form of the development, so you've got houses fronting onto the front street, that's supported in terms of those houses fronting there. We've got plot 5 here, which is located in the middle of the site, and the design officer considers that the positioning of this plot breaks up an otherwise logical layout, and the addition of this unit means that plots 1 to 4, which are at the back of the site here, are pushed further eastwards on the site, resulting in these plots having small rear gardens. So that's the rear gardens of these 4 plots here, and that's approximately 4 to 4.8 metres in depth. And the design officer has expressed concerns that these units may have an overbearing impact on the bungalow, which is to the east of the site. If I just take us back to there, that shows that bungalow there, and there's a garage there, which you can see on this plan here, which isn't shown on here, but it's there now. So the applicant has provided a solar study, which we've referred to in the report, and this study identified that there is some overshadowing, particularly in winter, but overall it concludes that this is not substantial. And officers consider a much improved layout could be achieved by if plot 5 were to be removed. This would enable plots 1 to 4 to have better amenity space because they could be brought forward to the west, whilst also improving the relationship of the proposal with Meadow Cottage. And it's the view of officers that the siting of plots 1 to 4 and the siting of plot 5, the depth of the rear gardens of plots 1 to 4 and the proximity to Meadow Cottage results in an unacceptable layout. And officer advice is that the proposed layout is therefore not acceptable. In terms of the impact on amenity of existing and future residents, the main impact will be on Meadow Cottage here. That property sits at a slightly lower level than the application site, and there's a garage there which is sited closest to the shared boundary of the application site. There's 1 window sited in the southwest gable in the roof space accommodation and 1 roof light facing the site facing the development site from Meadow Cottage. We'll just take us back onto the site layout. So you've got plots 1 to 4 at this eastern end, which are 2 blocks of semi-detached dwellings. So they'd be sited, I've mentioned, approximately 4 to 4.8 metres from the shared boundary. They will be highly visible from the garden areas serving this Meadow Cottage, serving that bungalow, and it's considered that the positioning and height of these units would appear visually dominant, resulting in an overbearing impact when viewed from this neighbouring property, and this impact is not considered to be acceptable. The proposed first floor bedroom to plots 1 to 4 is at a distance of that 4 to 4.8 metres from this neighbouring property, and it's considered that would affect the privacy of that property. In terms of noise, the site is located in an area with a number of different noise sources, including road traffic from the B1318, air traffic noise, and a noise report has been submitted to try to deal with these issues, and that's been considered by the Manager for Environmental Health. Concerns have been expressed about potential noise sources. One of the main issues is that Meadow Cottage, there's dog kennels in Meadow Cottage. So they have, you can probably see on one of these, some dog kennels there in the curtilage of Meadow Cottage, and there's an operation, and that's been referred to by the objector from Meadow Cottage as well. So the objector has put in concerns about the dog kennels at their property and the resulting potential noise impact on the new dwellings from that. So Environmental Health are concerned about noise arising from dogs barking at Meadow Cottage and the impact that this may have on the occupiers of the new dwellings. And the applicant has submitted a further noise report to address this, and this was circulated in an addendum, which I'll come on to in a second. The submitted information regarding road traffic confirms that external gardens would meet appropriate noise levels for outdoor spaces. And so the dwellings, there's no issues in terms of road traffic noise. And the additional noise survey information, which is being considered by Environmental Health, relates to noise arising from the dog kennels. So Environmental Health are concerned that noise monitoring is not reflective of the true extent of dogs barking, and that the first floor habitable rooms of plots 1 to 4 will have no screening or limited screening, and noise levels may result in potential disturbance. And she has advised that prolonged dog barking will give rise to high maximum noise levels and potentially result in a disturbance to the future occupiers of the development. So we've recommended, one of the reasons for refusal is in terms of all potential noise sources have not been considered fully to enable the application to be properly assessed. And without this information, it's not clear whether appropriate mitigation could be secured via condition. That would not result in other impacts. So it's officer advice that the benefits of bringing forward this vacant site does not outweigh the harm caused to the residential amenity of both the existing residents and future occupants of this site, or the potential impacts on the existing dog kennels at Meadow Cottage. And in terms of highways issues, the site will be accessed from Front Street, B1318. Parking will be provided in accordance with the council's standards. The Highways Network Manager has recommended conditional approval, and it's officer advice that, subject to conditions, the proposal is acceptable in terms of its impact on the highway safety and the wider highway network. In terms of biodiversity, the biodiversity officer has acknowledged that the proposed development would result in a small number of trees being removed. However, the submitted landscaping plan suggests that this will be mitigated by the planting of 10 standard trees on the site. It's officer advice that, subject to the imposition of certain conditions and a coastal mitigation contribution, the development will be acceptable in terms of biodiversity. In terms of Section 106 contributions, Section 106 contributions have been requested towards ecology, play, primary education and employment and training. Members are advised that the applicant has agreed to pay the requested Section 106 contributions as well as the coastal mitigation tariff. However, the legal agreement has not been progressed. Therefore, this is also proposed as a reason for refusal in order to ensure that this matter can be addressed if the application is refused by members and if an appeal were then to be lodged. So in conclusion, the application site is a designated housing site within the local plan. It's considered that the development is acceptable in terms of highway safety, biodiversity, flood risk and contaminated land issues. However, the proposed development is not considered to be acceptable in terms of its layout or its impact on the residential amenity of Meadow Cottage, and it's not considered that the benefits of bringing forward a vacant site outweighs the identified harm. And again, members are advised that the applicant is prepared to pay the Section 106 requested contributions, but because the legal agreement hasn't been signed, we need to include this as a reason for refusal. And so that's also set out as one of the 3 reasons for refusal, and those reasons are set out in the agenda. And I'll just refer to the addendum as well. The addendum concerned the additional noise information that had been submitted. basically the applicant had submitted some additional noise information in relation to the environmental health officer's concerns about dog barking at the site. I'm just going to try and summarise it as best I can. It goes into different sound levels that were experienced on the site, and about the number of dogs being present at the site, and about whether particular dogs were in season as well, which may cause more noise, which may affect the noise, and whether habitable rooms are, and whether there would be prolonged dog barking. So that was additional information that was set out by the applicant, and they dispute the environmental health officer, stating that the dog barking would be in the region of 55 to 62 decibels. And the manager of environmental health has reviewed that, and the addendum sets out the further comments from environmental health. And they've said they disagree that the dog barking would not give rise to potential statutory nuisance. And again, the environmental health officer remains concerned about prolonged dog barking, which would give rise to high noise levels and cause disturbance to future occupiers of the development. That's just a summary. Summary of that.
Thanks for that. I'm getting an echo. I don't know what's causing that. Anyway, Mr. and Mrs. Hogg, who live in Meadow Cottage, have submitted a statement. Michael, would you like to read that out, please?
Yeah. We would like to thank all the officers and committee members that have contributed in the evaluation of the validity of the above application. Our principal objectives can be read in detail within the planning application documents dated 5th of October, 18th August, 20th July, 25th June and 22nd June 2020. In summary, the proposed layout of the site means Unit 1 to 4 have been sited on the shared boundary with Meadow Cottage, some 4 metres from the boundary fence. These 2.5-storey townhouses that stand 9.1 metres to the ridge and span some 40 metres along the boundary. Meadow Cottage is a single-storey bungalow and as such is totally overwhelmed by these huge structures. This can clearly be seen on the drawing produced by our architect to help demonstrate the very nature of the scale of these townhouses in comparison to Meadow Cottage. We are claiming loss of light and privacy as we would be directly overlooked via our loft bedroom window, kitchen Velux window and newly constructed kitchen window. Whilst not directly overlooked, our master bedroom window and living room window would have clear line of sight at 45 degrees relative to the proposed townhouses. We have enjoyed 100% privacy. This would be reduced to 0% if the townhouses were approved. As demonstrated to the planning officer, there wouldn't be a single point within our garden that would not be overlooked. The police, council design officers and one councillor have raised concerns about the design of the housing development. The removal of Unit 5 would allow the developer to move Units 1 to 4 further away from Meadow Cottage, therefore minimising some of the issues raised. We concur with the officers that the siting of Unit 1 to 4 would result in an unacceptable impact on Meadow Cottage. We are registered with North Tyneside Council and hold a breeder's licence with a 5-star rating. This is the highest rating that can be awarded. We are also registered with the Kennel Club and hold the rights to our affix Brinkley Drift gun dogs. We have 15 dogs on site, 14 belong and are registered to us, with 1 additional dog boarding for gun dog training. We are employed by Lilburn Estate and work our dogs on shoot days, often up to 8 dogs at any one time. Our current client list includes Mrs. Sarah Davison of Lilburn Estate, Lady Elisa of Lockhart Estate, Sir Nicholas Soames and the Duke of Northumberland, and many more. We are working kennel, and as such they do generate some noise, in particular early mornings, afternoons, during bitches in season, and when anyone comes to the property, the dogs let us know before we hear the doorbell ring. When we train the dogs, we train on a one-to-one basis. This means the dogs left in the kennel bark for attention until it is their turn for training. The noise survey undertaken by the applicant's agents does not accurately reflect the noise generated during any one day. We are not experts, and it would appear reading various reports, it is unclear as to what is regarded as acceptable. The World Health Organization states a few people would be highly annoyed at levels over 55 decibels, and some people moderately annoyed at levels over 50 decibels. We are obviously not qualified to comment on acceptable noise levels relating to the dogs barking, but we would say with 100% certainty the dogs barking, regardless of the level of noise, will cause a nuisance to most people and ultimately will result in complaints that would have a significant impact on our kennels and future neighbours. As outlined in our previous objection, we are not against the development of this piece of land. We made this clear when we supported the council's planning in principle for between 5 to 8 houses. This was subject to conditions being attached regarding the status of the kennel. This would mean any developer would have to engage with us and take our situation into consideration at the design stage. We've given examples of good design layouts in the village with the right amount of properties relative to the size of land. Numbers 1 to 8 Burnbridge, Seton Burn, for example. Unfortunately, the drift-in development has gone for a maximum number of properties that compromises planning regulations and standards that ultimately has resulted in a poor design layout. We cannot support this development and would urge the committee members to support the council officers and refuse the application on the grounds outlined in paragraph 17.7 of the report.
Thank you, Michael. Now, Valley Environmental Consulting, on behalf of Northumbria Vehicles, have submitted a response. Could you read that out, please?
Yeah. The applicant welcomes the opportunity to rebut some of the points asserted by Mr. and Mrs. Hogg of Meadow Cottage. Specifically, we would wish the planning committee to note some of the statements to be inaccurate, overstated, and in relation to unlawful developments at Meadow Cottage. The planning committee should firstly be aware that the objector has never sought planning permission for kennels at his property, nor has he sought a change of use permission to commercial from residential use to support his stated highly rated business use. Secondly, the planning committee should be aware that the garage at the objector's property is built materially larger than was approved in 2018. This non-regularised development serves to render the objector's argument regards overlooking redundant, as will be demonstrated later. The first objection point is that the homes would span 40 metres across, 4 feet from the boundary fence and 9.1 metres in height. The homes themselves span 32 metres, are 4.6 metres from the boundary and are 12 metres from the residential property of Meadow Cottage. The average UK home is around 8 metres to ridge height, with 9.1 metres not considered a townhouse in scale, rather a 2.5-storey dwelling. The committee are asked to note that the North Tyneside Design Guide supplementary planning document requires that homes have separation distances, in this case of 12 metres back to gable, and that the proposed development at the site more than meets these requirements at over 12 metres. It should be noted by the committee that this extent of separation is acceptable and has been approved within similar residential developments across North Tyneside recently. The objector states that the proposed 2.5-storey homes, an acceptable distance from their property, are huge structures, which is to vastly overstate the case here. They are reasonable scale homes set appropriately away from Meadow Cottage. Meadow Cottage would clearly not suffer from a lack of daylight or otherwise, which has been accepted by the local authority in responses, and the applicant would ask the committee to note that very few habitable windows are present and would be affected on this side of the house. Further to this, the objector has a large conifer hedge in existence, which affords screening and privacy on the development side of the house. Views from the proposed development into a Velux window are unlikely due to the positioning and angle of the Velux window compared to those windows on the proposed development, and the supporting diagram shows that the windows referred to by the objector would not be subject to significant overlooking. And I think, Julie, yeah, you've displayed that diagram. Further, the unlawfully constructed garage, which is materially larger than approved, largely blocks views into the main window from the proposed development. Views into the garden would be limited over 12 metres away and from largely non-habited rooms on the proposed development. As such, the objectors' perceptions of views into their property are significantly overstated and can be seen to be acceptable based on the North Tyneside Design Guide. Turning to noise, the objection is quite disingenuous, intending to see a refusal that were the application to be approved, there would be no impact regards noise on the objector. The committee should note that every effort to provide an acceptable noise survey by the applicant has been made. This survey concludes that on average, the noise generated from the kennels would not be unacceptable to residents, and mitigation measures have been suggested. As such, it is difficult to understand why council officers suggest this may result in a statutory nuisance, which would be at quite a serious level for this development. The committee should note that the Environmental Health Officer has used the word may when referring to statutory nuisance, and that the Environmental Health Officer should have concluded that the sound level in gardens due to dogs barking will be below the level at which few people are moderately annoyed and significantly below the level at which few people are highly annoyed. This suggests that a 40 to 45 decibel the noise level will not cause a significant adverse effect, and as such, it is in accordance with paragraph 180A of the National Planning Policy Framework. The objector has stated a number of variables around dogs present, times of the day and specific times of dogs being in season. The British Standard Assessment Guidance for Noise should be based upon annual average data rather than occasional events, and this is what the noise assessment shows. The assessment demonstrates, for example, that even if the dogs bark all day with the same frequency as they did during feeding time, then the constant noise level value is still below 50 decibels. It is unreasonable and unrealistic to ask the applicant to model every potential variable, and therefore the noise assessment is more than fit for purpose. Based on the above representation, the applicant would ask that the committee are reassured that proven negligible impacts on residential amenity and noise do not derail the opportunity to provide much needed high quality homes at this gateway site in Seton Burn.
Thank you for that, Michael. Can I invite members to ask questions? There are no questions. Do you have any observations? In which case, I think we can. Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. I wholeheartily concur with the recommendations of the planning officers, and I'd like to thank them all for the time that they've taken with this particular planning application. It was a development plan. We're not against, nobody is against the development of the drift-in site, but it was originally supposed to be for 5 to 8 houses. This is for 10 properties. I have to say, the owners of Meadow Cottage, this was originally the groundsman's property for the Seton Burn welfare when it was a active miners welfare. The whole of that development has been done in conjunction with the council. It has enhanced the entrance to the welfare site in a way which very, very sympathetically, it's not a huge commercial dog kennels. It's a hobby that this couple have of breeding gun dogs. Now, gun dogs might not be everybody's cup of tea, but they are really highly qualified dogs. The police call in occasionally if they're looking for a sniffer dog or a search and rescue. So the dogs aren't just for that particular industry. It has operated, they're the only kennel registered in North Tyneside. I suggested some years ago that they got themselves registered because it obviously gave them some sort of status there and position. The issues that these 1 to 4 are much too close to the building of Meadow Cottage, whichever part of it. They don't have sufficient back garden space or amenity for anybody. And I think that, as I say, I cannot but concur wholeheartedly with the recommendations of the officers to refuse this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green, for the local history detail. And no one else has indicated. I think we can move to the vote. The officer recommendation, which is set out on page 96, is that the application be refused for the reasons set out on page 96. Can you please go through the roll call, Michael?
Certainly.
People are either in favour of the application to refuse or they are against it.
Councillor Barry.
For.
Councillor Brady.
For.
Councillor Dark.
For.
Councillor Graham.
Against.
Councillor Green.
For refusal.
Councillor Lott.
For.
Councillor Richardson.
For.
And Councillor Wheatman.
For.
So that's 7 votes to 1. The application is refused.
Thank you for that, Michael. Can we now go to page 123? And can I just briefly say, this is an application by Ovington Boats for a steel-framed extension to their existing operation. Ovington Boats manufacture Olympic-class boats. They're a world-famous company. Because there are no objections to this application and the reservations expressed by officers have been addressed by appropriate conditions, unless any member wishes to speak or is opposed to what I'm going to suggest, I'm proposing that we go straight to the vote. Right, no members indicated they wish to speak, so Michael, can you go straight to the vote on this, please? The recommendation is to approve the application, and that's set out on page 123.
Councillor Barry.
For.
Councillor Brady.
For.
Councillor Dark.
For.
Councillor Graham.
For.
Councillor Green.
For.
Councillor Lott.
For.
Councillor Richardson.
For.
And Councillor Wheatman.
For.
Approved unanimously, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. That does conclude the meeting, so can I thank you all for your attendance and your contributions. Could I have a quick word with the planning officers and Michael, and if Councillor Brady could stay online just for 2 minutes, please. Thank you. You can all get back to your business now.